On June 23, 1942, Royal Air Force spotters at Pembrey Airfield in South Wales watched in disbelief as a sleek German fighter descended through the clouds and lined up for landing. Normally, alarm sirens would have sounded and anti-aircraft guns would have swung into position, but something about the approach seemed odd. The Focke-Wulf 190 touched down smoothly on the grass runway and rolled to a stop near the control tower. The engine shut down, the canopy slid back, and Oberleutnant Armin Faber of Jagdgeschwader 2 climbed from his cockpit, pulling off his leather helmet as he surveyed the unfamiliar airfield. Within moments, his blood ran cold. The aircraft parked along the flight line weren't Messerschmitts, they were Spitfires. The men running toward him weren't wearing Luftwaffe gray, they were dressed in Royal Air Force blue. In that instant, Faber realized the dreadful truth. He had landed at a British airfield. Across southern England, British intelligence officers were simultaneously realizing what had just fallen into their hands. Germany's most lethal fighter, the mysterious new aircraft that had been devastating Allied pilots for months, had just been delivered intact to Britain by a pilot who had gotten lost and thought he was landing in France. The intelligence windfall was unprecedented. For 8 months, the Focke-Wulf 190 had been a nightmare haunting Allied pilots over the Channel. Since its combat debut over France in September 1941, it had outclassed every Allied fighter it faced. Squadron leader J.E. Johnny Johnson, who would later become Britain's top-scoring ace, barely survived his first encounter with one in early 1942. "It was faster than our Spitfire Mark V's in level flight and in the dive," he recalled. "It could outroll us. Its firepower was devastating. For the first time in the war, our fighters were comprehensively outclassed." The statistics told the same story. RAF fighter losses over France surged during the first half of 1942. Seasoned Battle of Britain veterans were being shot down by a machine they couldn't match. The FW-190 could dive away from Spitfires, outroll them in close combat, and destroy them with 20mm cannon fire. American pilots arriving in Britain with their new P-47 Thunderbolts were immediately warned, never engage the FW-190 in a turning fight, never try to outroll it, and never follow it into a dive. The list of things not to do was long. The list of effective tactics was terrifyingly short. Intelligence agencies desperately needed to know what made the FW-190 so effective and how it might be countered. But every example that had crashed in Britain was too badly damaged to study. Then Armin Faber made his catastrophic navigational mistake. Faber wasn't a rookie. At 21 years old, he was already a decorated Luftwaffe pilot and a member of Jagdgeschwader 2, the elite Richthofen fighter wing. On June 23, 1942, his unit was providing cover for British bombers attacking British coastal targets. The mission went smoothly until the return flight, when Faber became disoriented during a dogfight. Cloud cover obscured the coastline, and after aggressive maneuvering, he lost his bearings. Breaking through the clouds, he spotted an airfield surrounded by green countryside and assumed he was over France. In reality, he was over Wales. Believing it to be a friendly Luftwaffe base, he landed, only to discover too late that he had delivered Germany's most advanced fighter directly into British hands. Faber attempted to restart his engine and take off again, but RAF personnel quickly surrounded the aircraft. Within minutes, he was in custody, and British intelligence officers were inspecting the pristine FW-190A that now sat on their runway. The reaction at RAF headquarters bordered on euphoria. Air Chief Marshal Sholto Douglas, head of Fighter Command, ordered the aircraft transported immediately to the Royal Aircraft Establishment at Farnborough for testing. Within 48 hours, British engineers were examining every inch of the machine. What they discovered explained everything Allied pilots had experienced in combat. The FW-190 was a masterpiece of practical engineering. While the Spitfire represented aerodynamic elegance,
the FW-190 embodied brutal efficiency. Its BMW 801 radial engine produced 1,700 horsepower, far more than the Spitfire Mark V's 1,470. But its real strength lay in its roll rate. The aircraft could snap from one bank to another faster than any Allied fighter. This meant a German pilot could reverse direction and line up a shot before his opponent could react.
British test pilot Captain Eric Brown, who flew the captured FW-190 extensively, immediately understood the danger. The ailerons were light and responsive at all speeds, he reported. You could throw this aircraft around the sky with almost no effort. The Spitfire required muscle and finesse. The FW-190 responded to thought. Its firepower was equally impressive. 4 20mm cannons and 2 machine guns could unleash a devastating burst that shredded Allied aircraft in seconds. The German fighter's dive performance was unmatched as well. Its heavier airframe and aerodynamics allowed it to outdive any Allied aircraft. Yet the tests also revealed crucial weaknesses. The FW-190's radial engine, while powerful, suffered at high altitude. Above 20,000 feet, its performance dropped dramatically, while the Spitfire's Merlin engine excelled. Its heavy airframe made it less effective in prolonged turning fights, and its controls became sluggish at speeds above 400 miles per hour, creating vulnerability during high-speed dives. This intelligence changed everything. British commanders quickly issued new tactical bulletins to RAF squadrons, advising pilots how to exploit the FW-190's weaknesses. They also invited American test pilots to Farnborough. In August 1942, U.S. Army Air Forces personnel arrived to study the captured aircraft. Major Cass Hovey, one of the first to fly it, wrote in his report, "The FW-190 will beat any Allied fighter below 20,000 feet if the German pilot knows what he's doing. Our advantage is altitude. Above 25,000 feet, our P-47s and later Spitfires have the edge. Force them high and we win. Let them dictate low-altitude combat and we die." That single insight reshaped American fighter doctrine. From then on, U.S. bomber escorts flew at maximum altitude, and fighter sweeps operated above 25,000 feet. When German fighters tried to engage, American pilots climbed, forcing them into the thin air, where their engines struggled.
The captured FW-190 also influenced Allied aircraft design. Engineers at Wright Field studied its superior roll rate, leading to modifications in the ailerons of P-47s and P-51s. The placement of its guns inspired tighter weapon concentration on American fighters, and even its cockpit ergonomics influenced later designs. Most importantly, Allied pilots now knew the FW-190 was not invincible. Confidence returned to the air. By late 1943, upgraded Spitfire Mk9s and American P-51 Mustangs were turning the tide of the air war. Kill ratios improved, and FW-190 losses mounted as Allied pilots exploited their newfound knowledge. German ace Josef Pips Priller noted grimly that the enemy had learned. "They know not to follow us into rolling scissors. They force us high where our engines labor." The FW-190 that Armin Faber mistakenly delivered remained at Farnborough throughout the war, serving as a reference for analyzing new variants. When the FW-190D9 Dora appeared in 1944 with an inline engine, Allied engineers immediately compared it to Faber's aircraft to understand the improvements. After the war, aviation historians concluded that Faber's blunder had profoundly shaped the air war's outcome. The intelligence derived from that one captured fighter was distributed through training manuals, bulletins, and films, influencing tactics and saving countless lives. Captain Eric Brown later wrote, "Faber's navigation error gave us the Rosetta Stone for understanding German fighter design." Every tactical advantage the FW-190 possessed was documented and every weakness exploited. That single aircraft probably saved more Allied lives than any intelligence coup of the war. Ironically, the Luftwaffe had tried unsuccessfully to capture a Spitfire Mark IX intact. As one German officer later remarked, "The British didn't have to try. We delivered our best fighter directly to them." Armin Faber spent the rest of the war as a prisoner in Canada, later returning to Germany, where he lived until 1976. Though initially blamed for the loss, later assessments acknowledged that combat disorientation could happen to any pilot. His mistake, however, had far-reaching consequences. The FW-190 represented a technological leap when it appeared in 1941, dominating the skies through performance and innovation. But its advantage evaporated once the Allies could study it. Every aircraft design involves trade-offs, and once the Allies understood the FW-190's compromises, they exploited them. Today, the FW-190 is remembered as one of World War II's engineering masterpieces, but its legacy is inseparable from the irony that its greatest contribution to aviation came not through German victories, but through one pilot's moment of confusion that changed the balance of power in the skies over Europe.